I'm Robert Griffin, the Executive Minister here at the Sunshine Cathedral in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I want to thank you for joining us for worship via the internet today. And if you are ever in the Fort Lauderdale area, let me personally invite you to stop by and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. We also invite you to join us on our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter. But for this moment, let's go inside and see what exciting worship opportunity lay in store for us.
Please join me in our opening and responsive prayer. From the fragmented world of our everyday lives, we gather together in search of wholeness. Yet we know that no branch is utterly severed from the tree of life that sustains us all. We cherish our oneness with those around us and the countless generations that have gone before us. We would hold fast to all the good we inherit, even as we would leave behind us the outworn and the false. Let us labor in hope for the dawning of a new day, without hatred, violence, and injustice. Let us nurture the growth in our lives of the love that has shone in the lives of the greatest of men and women, the rays of whose lamps still illumine our way. In this spirit we gather, in this spirit we pray. Amen.
Our first reading is from the wisdom of Matthew Fox. Evil is the shadow of angel. Just as there are angels of light, support, guidance, healing, and defense, so we have experiences of shadow angels. And we have names for them: racism, sexism, homophobia, and all demons. But they're not out there. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Our second reading is from the Gospel according to Luke. A man came to Jesus. This man had demons inside him. For a long time, he had worn no clothes. He lived in the burial caves, not in a house. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him. The man said with a loud voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus? "Please don't punish me." He said this because Jesus had commanded the evil spirit to come out of him. Many times it had taken hold of him. He had been kept under guard and chain, hand and foot. But he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon out into the desert. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" The man answered, "Legion." He said his name was Legion because many demons were in him. The demons begged Jesus not to send them into eternal darkness. On the hill, there was a large herd of pigs eating. The demons begged Jesus to allow them to go into the pigs. So Jesus allowed them to do this. Then the demons came out of the man and went into the pigs. The herd of pigs ran down the hill and into the lake, all the pigs drowned. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Well, today is a very interesting kind of sermon. As you know, I come out of a Baptist tradition. We believe things come in three. And I kind of packed three sermons into one, but I'm going to try to make 3 points as best as I can and move us on through this. But it's just very worthy to remember that as we look at all of this week's events, that we look at them, we hold them in a special place, knowing that there is always, always hope to come and joy to remain with us. But as we look at these 3 different stories that I want to talk about in just a few minutes, there is, of course, our gospel reading. And then I want to talk about a gospel of our past. And then I will finish with the gospel of our present. And each of these gospel story points to good news, and they will end with an aspect of being set free. But in today's gospel is about a man who is different from anyone else. What else is new? We're all different from everybody else. But this man was so different that Scripture says for a long time he wore no clothes. Well, we may have seen that last night on Wilton Drive. I don't know. It's just that time of the year. I just leave it at that. But so different that he was put out of the city, forced to live out in a cemetery. So different that he could not function even as a normal part of society. He was so different that many times whatever was wrong with him just literally took over his body. It was so bad sometimes that he had to be kept on a guard, bound in chains from his head to his feet. But this one particular time, he managed to escape, and he broke the chains, and he fled into the desert. And with all of his ups and downs in life, no really true medical attention, with all of his distractions that must have had him going deep internally, he just wanted to get away. He just needed to be away, so he fled. But on the day that he decides to flee, he has an encounter with Jesus. And when he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him. And the man said with a loud voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus?" That's not your everyday question when you encounter somebody, but maybe it is. But what do you want with me, Jesus? Now that may sound a little fearful. The man might have been afraid that Jesus was even there to punish him. If Jesus had the nerves to stand up to the religious and government authorities, what might he do with some miserable guy, maybe even with a mental disorder? Or maybe the poor man was worried what the good townspeople had said about him, and he felt that since he couldn't handle him in town, that they had sent Jesus to deal with him. Maybe he wanted Jesus to like him, but he was afraid that gossip had already poisoned Jesus against him. But with all of his problems, somehow he broke out of his internal dialogue just long enough to ask Jesus, "What do you want?" Now, despite the fact of what Jesus might have heard about the man, despite his appearances, Jesus engages him simply by asking, "What is your name?" He didn't ask him what folks had said about him. He didn't ask him why he was in the state that he was in. Jesus just asked, "What is your name?" Instead of prejudging him, Jesus says, "Tell me all about yourself.
The man simply answered that his name was Legion. Scripture says that Legion, because of many demons were in him, was his name. But now, Legion is really not a name, rather it is a number. Or stated differently, in this moment, it is a name that conveys the number of powers of demons or maybe problems that possess this man. And certainly at this period of time, we will recall that a Roman legion would be composed of 5,000 to 6,000 men. The Roman legion ruled with an iron fist. So maybe this is why he was identifying with the number of a legion that was things that was going on inside of him. And even in our lives, sometimes we are so overwhelmed by our problems that we think that we can never overcome them because they are so many. We may find ourselves saying that we have a legion of problems that will suggest an insurmountable, and that we just don't know if we're going to be able to overcome them. The man saying, Jesus, I have too many problems even to name them. Look, I'm hurting. I'm a social outcast. They lock me in chains. I'm too much of a mess for people to deal with. The demons, the problems, the disappointments, the pains, they are legions upon me. They have ruined me. They seem to control me. I no longer see myself as separate from my difficulties. But I believe that by simply asking the man his name, something about his brokenness began to shift. To ask someone their name is to see them. To ask someone their name means you want to know them better. To ask someone their names means that they are worthy of you getting to know them. Asking someone their name, even if you have to ask it again and again, and sometimes in my case, again and again, is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that there is something there. Something interesting and good that we see, something we want to know more about and to connect with. But whatever the barrier may be, we want to break the barrier down so that we can understand each other a little bit better. So when Jesus said, "What is your name?" I believe that something internally began to happen in this man's life. Jesus wanted to see him. He wanted to see him for who he was, not what others had said about him. He didn't just want to know what was wrong. He wanted to know what was good, what was possible, what he'd hoped for, what he had dreamed about, what was strong or kind or generous or smart or loving about him. The man was more than his problems, more than his pain, more than what had happened to him. And Jesus reminded him of that, and when he started to believe it, the so-called demons couldn't stay. The self-hatred had to go. The hopelessness had to go. The fear that he was unlovable had to go. One by one, the legions of problems had started to get better. Now, the old folks, when I was growing up, not that I'm one of them, they used to say something along the lines that something had happened and something had to be did. Something had happened to this man to make him so lonely. Something had happened to him that made him be afraid. Something had happened to him to make him feel hopeless. Something had happened, and certainly something had to be did. And I believe that Jesus did it. He saw him as he was. He recognized his dignity. He affirmed him. He loved him. He did not want no one who had gone through what he had been going through to ever go through it again, simply by asking him, "What is your name?" He asked him to share his story. And in that moment of compassion, the broke man started his journey back to wholeness. See, once we are healed of the idea of a punishing God, or once we are healed of the notion that we are not loved by God because of who we love, or once we are healed of the idea that God is not out to get us, once we are healed from any and all of those legions of demons that goes on inside of us, we realize that they really do have to go, that they can't stay there. Because as we begin to name them one by one, we feel wholeness and healing and love entering into our lives. The man who had been suffering, when treated with dignity, when treated with respect, when shown love and care, was ultimately and literally set free. Now, the second story I want to talk about this morning is a story from our past. In fact, it takes us back to the year of 1862. On September the 22nd, 1862, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, in which he declared that as of January 1, 1863, all slaves in the states of rebellion against the Union, quote, shall be then, therefore, and forever free. But sadly, there was this one little town, and I'm sure that there were probably others, but there was this one little town in the great state of Texas called Galveston. For some reason, word of freedom didn't reach the African American slaves of Galveston, Texas, until June the 19th, 1865. 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, when a force of 2,000 Union soldiers arrived and informed them of their freedom, that they know that 2.5 years earlier that they had been set free. And although news did travel slowly in those days, 2.5 years is a long time. And historians suspect Texas slave owners knew of the proclamation and chose not to free their slaves until they were forced to do so. Folks who had been set free remained in slavery for 2.5 years after being set free. Sometimes hope, wholeness, strength, peace, and abundance, they are there for us, and we just don't even know it. But on June 19th, 1865, 151 years ago today, now known as Juneteenth, is when Union troops entered Galveston, Texas, the last city on record to enforce the liberation of enslaved people. The Legion, the many years of slavery, had not gone unwillingly, hanging on through a war of rebellion that cost more lives than any other in our national saga. But with the new order, however long it took to reach Galveston, Texas, people were finally free. They celebrated their new awareness of their freedom, and we continue to celebrate that even today. People, a nation, being set free. The third story this morning is taken right from the headlines of the day. It is daunting to think that at this time of the year, and for every year going forward, we will remember the Charleston Nine. And now we remember the Orlando 49, all of whom were killed by hatred, bigotry, and fear. We promise we will never forget, and we will continue to diligently pray and work for a better world. But there seems to be a new awakening to something that many of us have known for a very long time. And that is the realization that all over the world, thousands and thousands of people have died because of their sexual or gender identity. And we must finally say, enough is enough. Some are waking up to the notion that many have died and continue to die because of the color of their skin or religious belief. We must finally wake up and say, enough is enough. Religious bigotry and hatred the world over is piercing the hearts and souls of our families, and we must finally stand up and say, enough is enough. The shooting at the gay club Pulse in Orlando overwhelmed us, and yet we must remain vigilant and hopeful, because at the end of the day, we live in hope, and that we really believe that love will win, because we're going to stand up and say, enough is enough. My friends, it is not a time for us to go back into our closet. It is not a time to pull back from places that we enjoy. It is a time to live out loud and proud. It is a time to say, here I stand. I am a proud person to be who I am and proud to be who God has created me, because we must remember God is a God of miracles and God has not created any mistakes by creating us. Now, one side of me asks, why are we shocked that this happened? The reality is that we have really been here many times before. Sandy Hook Elementary School, San Bernardino, Fort Hood, Texas, the Washington, D.C. Navy Yard, Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, just to name a few. The list could go on and on and on. But most recently, the violence that impacted all of us occurred in Orlando. And we must add our voices to the voices of survivors, and we must be the voice of those who had their voices taken away from them all too soon by standing up once again and saying, enough is enough. Those voices that were silent were friends of friends and family, gay and straight together, lovers and spouses, the voices of two men who were to be married but who now are instead buried together in eternity. We can't wait for a legion of issues to go away before we have gun laws in this country reformed. We can't wait for another 2.5 years of wondering when the good news will come. We can't wait for another 49 lives to be taken by hatred and bigotry and fear. We must stand up and say enough is enough. We will stand and we will help set others free as a witness to the good news, because that's what we are called to do. We are not called to be innocent bystanders, but we are called to stand and help set others free so that they can enjoy all that we are being able to enjoy today. So I want to ask you today, who will stand with me as a witness in saying enough is enough? The gospel of God today. The gospel of God is calling us today to do the work of justice. And until all of us are set free, until all of us are set free, until all of us have come out of the closet that we have been hiding in, until all of us work through our own legions of demons, and that we are able to stand together united in the Sunshine Cathedral, united in our community, united with Fort Lauderdale. Until that day comes, we must all be willing to work because love will always win at the end of the day, which is our ultimate goal. And this is the good news. Amen.
Thank you for joining us today here at the Sunshine Cathedral. If you're ever in the Fort Lauderdale area, we invite you to stop by and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. If you'd like to make a donation to the Sunshine Cathedral, or if you'd like to find out other resources that the Cathedral has to offer, please visit us at www.sunshinecathedral.org. Until the next time, we look forward to seeing you here at the Sunshine Cathedral.